Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and here we are with Raff Capashen, Ship's Mage, an Azorius Flash deck, but we could say Flash Historic deck that comes to us from Bijan. This is one of our donation decks of the week, so thank you Bijan for supporting the channel. They say what they need done on the deck is fine-tuning / a few more glue cards that hold the deck together. Also looking for a few more cards that synergize with Excalibur, some double strike enabler, and the Capitoline Triad. That's probably not how to pronounce that, which they say maybe some token makers. In terms of restrictions, they just want to leave their favorite cards: Alish Norn, Hullbreaker, Gisela and Bruna, and World Slayer. Also, they want no Rhystic Study or Smothering Tithe. Absolutely, we can work with that. Raff Capashen is one of my favorite commanders, and I definitely see what you might want as in glue cards, and I might have a different set of suggestions for that. But that's going to be a little bit of theory, so instead of doing that, let's take a look at our commander and get right into it. If you'd like to take a look at the deck list we're talking about today, or if you'd like to submit your own deck list to me so that I can make a video assisting your deck, please check the video description down below. So who is Raff Capashen Ship's Mage, and why are they our historic Flash commander? Well, this one's very straightforward. Raff Capashen's a 4 mana 3/3 human wizard with flash and flying, and says you may cast historic spells as though they had flash. And historic spells are artifacts, legendaries, and sagas. So something I already really love is Raff Capashen is just a great card generally. I got one as my promo when he originally came out. It was Dominarius something, I can't quite remember, but I got that, like, the promo card that has the date of the pre-release, so that's always been a favorite of mine, and I really like Flash as kind of like a pillar of blue-white's kind of, you know, commander archetypes, where you can build a deck where you enable everything to be Flash, which either, you know, some people try to fit that into other things with like Leyline Anticipation or the Vidalcan Orrery. But I kind of really like Raff because Raff is just from the command zone, and so you always have access to this. And if you've never played with a commander with Flash or any other ability to be played at instant speed, it's a huge difference. The ability to just like kind of hold up mana for the rest of the game for your commander, and because of how this deck works for the rest of the deck, is really, really good and leads to some like really good play patterns. So looking at the deck itself, you know, the deck builder is talking about glue cards. So sometimes I have to, like, you know, interpret these kind of messages. What do they mean by glue cards? Well, it seems to me they're looking for cards that help the deck kind of function smoother, right? Cards that kind of fit multiple roles, cards that you're not, you know, too upset with drawing at any point in the game, that kind of stuff. And though I do have some suggestions for that, the main thing I want to point out is that these questions almost universally tend to be structural problems and not so much card quality problems. What do I mean by that? So, like, let's take the question on its face. What are glue cards? And does this deck have glue cards already? Glue cards are, just as mentioned before, cards that are just generally good. They forward your game plan, and they don't feel bad to draw late game, right? You feel like you're a part of the game and that you're building towards a win. And we can see, if we look at the deck is filled with glue cards, from like Esper Sentinel, which is one of the strongest white creatures that you can play at any time in the game, to Stoneforge Mystic, who can pull any form of equipment that can be relevant in different board states, to even Alish Norn, who is, yes, a 7-mana creature, but whenever you can cast her out, she is like one of the most powerful, I'm gonna say most powerful white cards. I picked 3 white cards that are really powerful, but she is incredibly powerful, right? These are glue cards. You know, having access to Path to Exile, Swords to Plowshares, having Seagate Restoration, like, these are really, really strong cards. So immediately the thought is, well, it's not the cards that are the problem. It's the structure and the access to the cards. And if you looked ahead or are looking at the screen or know this channel, you kind of know where I'm going with this. because immediately when we look into our land count, which is 32 and 36 including MDFCs, and we look at our mana curve, it's quite apparent where the problem lies, if you ask me. The fluidity of a deck. I haven't explained this in a while. I tend to look at deck like how a deck is on two axes. Power, which is how we generally think of the strength of the individual cards and combos, and successfulness, which is fluidity or functionality. How the deck, how much does the deck get in its own way, and how does the deck feel like it just kind of plays itself? Like, think of that as a kind of scale. And when we have a deck that, one, has a lot of like mid drops, we kind of plateau from 2 to 4, right? And then trail off quite a bit to other drops that we do actually want to cast. Excalibur's an exception because it's reduced, but the other ones, oh, they're both reduced, sorry. But we do have 8, 7, 6 drops and the like. So we look at this kind of thing, and we look that we have only 32 lands and 36 when we are playing all these MDFCs, which every single one is a Bolt MDFC, which does add up. I think it's relevant to consider that more than 10% of your lands will deal you 3 damage on ETB if you want access to them immediately, which you often do. That's going to add up. So looking at that, we can see that there is a problem with the fluidity of the deck, right? Like, some of these cards cost less than they appear, like Vanquish the Horde as well, but some of these cards also cost more than they appear, such as, where is 3 Steps Ahead is actually not a 1 mana spell. It is, I would say, generously a 3 mana spell, and perhaps sometimes more. So looking at this, immediately what I just want to do is look through the 4 drops and cut as many of these as possible. And though I'm not going to actually go through all of them, I'm going to do a really quick run through of cards that I think are worth taking out. It is just really worth noting that, like, our 4 drop is very, very cluttered when we absolutely want to play our commander every time we have 4 mana in every game, right? So all of these cards, with maybe the exception of Metamorph, because it's technically 3 mana, are just going to be on the side. They're going to be an afterthought, right? And they're going to be forever like relegated to 1 spell a turn, right? Like, because you can't cast, like, you're at 4 mana, so once you hit 5 mana, sure, you can cast a 1 mana spell and a 4 mana spell, but that's not always going to be the case. Some of these cards do not want to be double cast, and some of them want to be held up. Some of them aren't even 1 mana, and so it's much more likely that you're just going to cast a 4 drop if you have that, and then so on and so forth. You need 6 mana to do a 4 drop and a 2. Like, it's so much mana in a deck that is very low on mana and low on mana rocks. So let's get through, I'll say, just a bunch of cards that stick out to me as kind of the weaker bits, and ones that I feel like aren't really in the theming of your plan and might be holding you back more than helping you. So let's cover a few. The first one is the Wanderer. I get how flashing the Wanderer out can be kind of cool. She comes out and you can stop Blasphemous Act, generally, or you can stop like a combo that was going to do an infinite or a large amount of damage to you. But I would also suggest that that's maybe a counterspell would do that better, and the Wanderer just really isn't that impressive and will probably be knocked out of the fight very, very quickly. Likewise, when you flash her out, you actually cannot use her -2, unlike her other 4 mana version, which allows you to, who already has flash, and it can be activated at instant speed. So this version of the Wanderer is just not very impressive and an easy cut. That being said, I don't know if you guys were around for this when War of the Spark came out, but there were a lot of rumors that the Wanderer was a personification of Emrakul, which is ridiculous now, but I really, really liked it. I thought it was a really, really cool idea. Maybe we'll see something like that in the future. Going forward, Elspeth Sun's Champion also feels kind of weak. These 2 cards just don't really fit the theme, and flashing them out doesn't really seem to be a good plan, so I would probably cut both. Pippin is cute. The fact that you're basically flashing Pippin in to give it a tap ability on the next turn, I think that's fine. I just don't really think this really improves your game plan other than protection. And generally, if that's the case, why aren't we just playing protection spell, protection enchantment, or protection equipment over Pippin? Especially since the equipment still has that kind of flash ability as being its historic, whereas Pippin just kind of is a bad attacker that is just going to stick around like a bad giver of runes or mother of runes. So not very impressed by them. Boromir is fine. I'm not quite sure what this is. Like, once again, we have a few of these. Lavinia is here too. We have several creatures that are legendary that we can flash in, whose main purpose of being here is to be able to be sacrificed to protect our commander. And that feels really clunky. Now you might say, well, Curse, they'll protect the rest of the board too. And I'm going to say, but what board? We have 28 creatures. Our creatures' powers are based more on their utility, and a few of them are just meant to be, you know, bombs. Like, don't get me wrong, I respect the idea of, like, I want to keep Elish Norn alive because her ability is amazing, but you don't often need to, because when she enters the battlefield and kills a bunch of creatures, you've gotten the value out of her, right? If someone then removes her, you kind of take that as, oh, okay. And generally, if you wanted to protect her, you would use Unwind, Rewind, things like that, sink into Stupor, right? And not keeping Boromir around, right? And getting one ring tempts you kind of trigger. So those two kind of stick out to me as being a little weaker. Another one just I wanted to touch in, Hullbreaker Horror has natural protection because of its ability to make any one of your spells either bounce the Hullbreaker or bounce the removal, and Avacyn just has indestructible. Oh no, Avacyn herself is not indestructible, but Avacyn gives indestructible. Anyways, so like I feel like these are a little redundant and aren't really helping your game plan otherwise. Loran, on the other hand, is great. Wave Break is great. Ephara feels cute. We're in some of the 4 mana here, so I'm going to be really, really hard on these cards because we really need to cut down the 4 mana cards, which, let's just go through the 4 mana here. So Ephara, she's cute because, like, the idea is that you flash a creature out every turn and then you draw a card every turn. But the deck itself does not have the means to do this. If we come back to our curve, we have 1 1-mana creature, we have 5 2-mana creatures, we're immediately into 3 mana, several which I've said to cut. We go into 4 mana, like, we're not casting multiple of these spells reliably. So I do like Ephara, and I do think you should keep her, but I think you should adjust the curve to play a lot more low mana creatures that have, like, equal impact, so that you can use Ephara and draw 3 cards in a turn cycle, and you're going to be very, or 4 if you can do it, and you're going to be very happy with that. But in the current build, she's really not doing much. Gisela, I won't touch. I also like Gisela. I think she's fine here. Grand Arbiter, I feel like, is so powerful. I'm kind of fine with that ability. Like, as much as I just want to say, you know, this is another 4 mana card, we can cut it. Grand Arbiter is an incredibly powerful card that will force your opponents to, like, deal with you. And in a deck like this, it's generally going to be good. The mana reduction is good, so I think this one's fine. I just don't expect this creature to live for a very long time. Halvar, I think we can cut. I understand this is meant to combo with our Excalibur, but I feel like that's overkill, right? We shouldn't be... The deck builder did ask, they're like, should I be putting in Double Strike to work alongside my, like, equipment? And I don't think that's necessary. I think having an easy to access +10 is more than enough. Having both, you know, this auto attach and this Double Strike on enchanted or equipped creatures on a 4 mana 4/4 is just like an investment that's not very much so worth it, right? Excalibur is equipped too. We're not really saving that much in order to, you know, cheat it into an equip. And yeah, when we Double Strike, we can potentially kill a player with our flying creature, but like that's also implying that no one has flying blockers, no one has removal for either, your commander, Halvar, or the Excalibur, which I think is very hard to believe. So this is like a very, very big investment that I think is just too much of an investment. If we were like further into equipment, and we're already very much so into equipment, maybe I'd be impressed. And maybe also if we had, because we have some equipment that just doesn't work with the claws. Like, don't get me wrong, double striking a creature is never a bad thing, but like, having cards that don't, I guess it's fine. I don't particularly like it. The double strike is fine, but I think Halvar being a 4-mana card is kind of rough. That being said, Halvar is also Sword of the Realms, which is interesting, except for it also doesn't particularly work with this deck. I suppose there's a few creatures that you're pretty happy just to buy back, but in those cases, wouldn't Skull Clamp just be better for that kind of effect? Like, not a lot of your creatures have enter the battlefield effects, which is generally what you want to reuse, so that if, you play your creature, you equip this, and someone removes your creature, you can be like, oh, cool, I'll get it back. But really, in the meantime, you're not really getting any benefit from it. You're just casting the card again and continuing to kind of stall in your board state. Not even, once again, counting the fact that your opponents might just remove your creatures with this ability to equip on the stack, or your creature won't die. It'll get exiled or bounced or shuffled, and in those cases, you're not going to get anything. So, not very much so impressed by this card. Mangara, I'm going to leave this out. Is Mangara still good? Because I've never thought it was good. I've never seen this card do things. But I see it every now and then in decks. So I'm going to leave this up to the deck builder, and maybe commenters can let me know if this is a card that still does things. It's such an investment. Like, I get Mangara on, like, I don't know, just definitely lower power groups, but you're also playing Esper Sentinel. And comparing Esper Sentinel to, like, Mangara is just mean, right? Like, it's just mean. Mangara has no chance. 4 times the cost, and triggers, I would probably say, not often at all in comparison, right? Whereas Esper Sentinel triggers all of the time, is incredibly powerful. Like, why do we need this card here when we have better options? And lifelink doesn't matter for this deck. 4 mana, too much. Let's just keep moving. Mirel, I think Mirel's much better. Mirel does a lot for the deck. The silence on your turn is interesting, but it also kind of goes against the whole idea of the deck, right? The whole idea of the deck is you're operating on other people's turns. So yes, it is cool that we have this flash ability, like we have this, like, on combat, nobody can do anything, but we don't really interact with combat anyways. So we're just playing combat fairly when we do this, where neither us or our opponents can kind of interact on combat. And then we're holding up mana for other people's turns. So, like, this won't stop counter magic on our spells, for example, unless we commit to playing them on our turn. So Mirel is very, very strong. I think it's fine, but it just feels a little strange in a Raff Capshen deck. Especially that, once again, like, yes, you can flash this creature, but why would you do that? This creature does legitimately nothing when you flash it in. And I guess this is like a convoluted way to give it haste by flashing in on your last opponent's turn, but like, that's not great. I'd rather just have Lightning Greaves on demand. I just keep coming back. Something also to touch on Halvar and Sword of the Realms and equipment in general, and we might need a solution to this problem, but one of the things is that when you flash in equipment, or when we flash in creatures and we want to equip them, we can't equip them at instant speed, and therefore Sword of the Realms can't be flashed in to protect a creature. Now, if we were playing Sigarda's Aid, for example, which I will put out here, modern Hammer Time staple, Sigarda's Aid would allow your equipment to attach immediately, and there could be something to be said about that. So you can flash in equipment to protect creatures, or flash in equipment to get certain abilities off. That would be very cool, but as it is now, a lot of your equipment can come in at instant speed and not do anything. Phyrexian Metamorph's great. Witch Enchanter's great. Rewind's fine. Helm of the Host, This feels really, really greedy, right? Like, the ceiling on this card is absurd, don't get me wrong, but the floor is awful. We just, if we had more equippers, if we were playing Pure Steel Paladin, if we were playing, like, we have Stone Hero Giant, but if we had a few more at lower mana, maybe I would like this more. But so how do we use this card? We grab Stoneforge Mystic, we play Stoneforge Mystic, we get this card, we play this card, we attach it to Stoneforge Mystic, we get another Stoneforge Mystic, which gets us another equipment, right? Or we attach this to like Elshnorn, Hullbreaker Horror, Griselda, Avacyn, things like that, where we get massive kind of perks of having 2 copies of these cards. However, that's still a tremendous amount of mana, right? Like, maybe this is something to say of keeping Halvar in, but otherwise, this card is just such an investment into this deck that just cannot produce the mana required to do this. So we're not really getting much out of it. So to me, in this current setup, it is a cut. And Nev's Disc also, like, the flash aspect of Nev's Disc is completely blocked purposely by this Enters Tapped ability. So we're just playing it fairly once again, or we're just flashing it in, much like Mirel to give it pseudo haste. I don't know. I don't particularly think that's good. So there's a lot of cuts there. Looking around for anything else that immediately reaches out to me. Meadowmai, I'm going to have a better card for that, so that can be cut. Instants and sorceries are pretty good. Artifacts are pretty good outside of the ones I've said. And enchantments, I think, are probably a little heavy on these cards. Duelist Heritage can't be flashed in, so we're playing it incredibly fairly. And don't get me wrong, Duelist Heritage is a lot of fun, but this isn't the kind of deck that can give your opponents creatures to take advantage of Duelist Heritage with. Like, if you have, I know this is one I suggest all the time, but Rite of the Flaming, Rite of the Raging Storm. Rite of the Raging Storm is the one I usually suggest to give people creatures and force them to attack, and then Duelist Heritage, giving it a 5/1 now double strike trample, makes it really, really good. But here, we're not giving our opponents anything to attack each other with, and the only way we incentivize them not attacking us is with the Heritage or the Prison and Propaganda. So I don't know how often this triggers outside of like just adding 3 to 5 damage when your opponents attack each other, and that's kind of it, and I don't think that's worth 3 mana. If this was on like an artifact or a historic permanent where you could flash it in for like kind of a surprise, I would like that more, but in the current state, it's just a fair card to play. Like, it's just being played very fairly, and I don't think that's good here. Ghostly Prison and Propaganda. I don't particularly like these cards here, but they're not the worst. I think some protection is in order because a lot of your creatures are not really built for combat, and therefore either will be just utility creatures to be picked off, or, I mean, the ones that attack will attack with evasion, right? Having some defense could be good, but I think I'd prefer more board clears over Ghostly Prison or Propaganda, I would say. And Elspeth Conqueror's Death feels like this should just be Midnight, Stroke of Midnight, because this is just really complicated to do something that you need probably to hit any permanent, right? And since we can't really enable this because we don't have a lot of meaningful destroy effects, we're really just playing this for the first step, which I don't think is particularly good. All right, let's go and look at additions quickly before. All right, so I have the first 3 additions are all based on one theme or one combination of things that Crystal Skull is the perfect example of. And Crystal Skull is like the perfect card for your deck. I was very surprised to see other Assassin's Creed cards, yeah, but not the Crystal Skull. This is the card for the deck. It gives you the Future Sight effect for historic spells and lands, which are the point of your deck, and it makes mana, which this is going to be my suggestion of what the deck is kind of missing, and that is more reliable mana rocks and more reliable card draw. How do we do this? Well, the main idea is that mana rocks tend to be, well, they're rocks, so they're historic. So we can use them, flash them in, and get more value, because as we flash in more mana rocks, we gain more mana, so we can flash in more cards. So there's a lot of different ones we can use. The Crystal Skull by itself is one of the perfect ones. It's 4 mana, but it's perfect at 4 mana. You're going to be very, very happy with that. When it comes to card draw, I want to suggest things like the Everflowing Well. It doesn't have to be the Everflowing Well, but I think this is a really, really, like, I think you should play this one, but you can also find other, like, artifacts that come in and draw you cards. The Everflowing Well is basically divination that mills 2 and that transforms into a land. Every part of this card is good for your deck, whether you're milling cards to put more historic cards into your graveyard for effects, to the fact that it also cares about your graveyard and then later turns into a land after you've gotten the cards. Overall, just a fantastic card. I think if you're in blue and artifacts, Everflowing Well is really, really accessible as a pretty damn good divination with a lot of upside. And I think we play in a world that sometimes people balk at divination because we live in like a Rhystic Study, Mystic Remora world, Esper Sentinel. But the ability to get cards now, this is the same thing I talk about Read the Bones and the other black versions of this kind of ability where they're 3 mana, draw 2 with upside usually, is that sometimes you want the cards now, and sometimes you need to dig very deep. And though this doesn't dig very deep, it gives you the cards right now, and it allows you to like enable your game plan. Like this is a glue card, if that makes sense. And the gluiness of it is more of the fact that this text of draw 2 cards. The fact that this deck just allows you to keep drawing and digging, much like how the Crystal Skull allows you to dig. Both of these very, very good. The third one, on the same theme, it's the mana production. Worn Power Stone, I think, is very, very good here. It's very much so 3 mana to get a 3 mana Soul Ring, and that's still very, very good, even when you don't have the mana right away. Flashing this in makes it less of a commitment, especially when you have nothing else to do with your mana, and then having this just around for your next turn to get even further and bigger cards out is going to be very good. Looking at a few other cards that do a lot of work in this deck, Goldforge Thopteryx is very, very good. Giving all your legendary permanents in a historic deck Ward 2 is very, very strong. And I think in a lot of ways is like a proactive Boromir, where yes, this doesn't stop board clears, but it does give your commander quite a bit of protection while being a card that you can flash in. Now, do note, you cannot flash this in response to like a kill spell. You have to have this out as soon as possible for the ward to effect before people start trying to trigger your commander, but still the flash isn't nothing because it allows you to hold up like some kind of counter magic or something, and then when you don't need it, you flash this out, giving the ward to all of your legendary permanents. So very, very good. Also, the first time I read this, it made me really sad, but they're together now, and it makes me feel a lot better. Also, interesting that it's a white-blue card, even though the color they share is red. I always found that interesting. Maybe that's why. White, red, blue, red. Yeah, okay, I get that now. This is the colors they don't share, and that's why it is. Okay, well done, Wizards. Sarah Jane Smith, another low mana historic creature that I thought was worth playing. This is whenever you cast a historic spell, Investigate. This triggers only once each turn. As players know, when that once each turn clause is there and you have a flash deck, it means you can trigger it up to 4 times per turn cycle because you have the means to do so. She's also historic, and as a 2/1 for 2, she's just fine. She can get you easy attacks and do some decent blocks. The clues are also mana sinks in a deck that I think will really benefit from a mana sink that isn't just like, you know, Hullbreaker Horror. Because that's not a mana sink. But people know what I mean by mana sinks. I'm going to explain it right now just in case, as that just caught my eye. A mana sink is something that you can activate or put mana into that has a general positive effect. It's generally something that costs low mana and can be repeated. And it gives you an alternative when you've held up all your mana and you don't want to cast your big thing or you have nothing else to cast. It allows you to spend mana more efficiently, so you end every turn cycle having spent all your resources. So clues are very, very good at that. So this is a good inclusion. I mentioned earlier board clears. I think you can play Supreme Verdict in here basically for free, and I think you should. Supreme Verdict is a very, very good card, and I think players do somewhat underestimate it. I do recognize that in lower powers, generally people are more afraid of Boromir effects than they are of Supreme like counter magic. So Supreme Verdict's spells can't be countered sometimes is valued less than like Farewell that gets around that. I still think you should play this. It's incredibly mana efficient. It'll get you out of situations that are like dangerous to you, and unfortunately you can't flash it in, but it's still good. There is alternatively Urza's Ruinous Blast, which you can flash in, but it doesn't hit everything. So I do want to suggest it, but I don't know. Something I do like about my board clears is that they clear the board. Maybe that's a bit redundant to say, but like something like Urza's Ruinous Blast will sometimes just not get the targets that you want out of the game, and that's going to suck a lot. So sometimes I generally will prefer Supreme Verdict, but being able to flash this out is going to be very good. So I'll leave this here for you to decide. Another similar card to Ruinous Blast, but definitely stronger, is Desynchronization, which bounces all non-land permanents that aren't historic to their owner's hand. Same thing, that this doesn't hit everything, and you need to know that. But I will note that this is always instant speed, so you don't need your commander out. And notably, the thing that you generally want to clear boards from is like an unbelievable amount of tokens. And this gets not just creature tokens, but like treasures, clues, food, blood. All of these will go away. Oh, that's not historic. I'm a liar. Okay, so I guess it doesn't get rid of the ones we want. Okay, maybe I like this a little less. I think it's still good, but I was really keen on the fact that this would get rid of treasures. So now it doesn't get rid of treasures. This is just fine. Maybe don't play it. Karn's Temporal Sundering. This is the card I want to replace the Sphinx. This is very much so just another take another turn card. You can only use it once because it exiles itself, but as one might understand, this card can be cast at instant speed by your commander, and that makes it way, way stronger. Your Sphinx, you have to cast, you can flash him in, that's fine, but then you have to attack and hit with that. And it's like you've already paid 6 mana for it and it might get removed. I'd rather just flash Karn's Temporal Sundering, bounce something, and take another turn. And what's really cool about this is that means that you can take a turn out of turn order, which is very rare to do in Magic. So you could be like in between your second and third opponent and take a turn there. Or you could, of course, just wait until the last end step and then take 2 turns in a row, which is also very, very strong. But the ability to just take another turn and disrupt what is seen as the turn order or like the planning of how the game goes can be very, very powerful. So I think this one's very, very good. And the last thing I want to say, and this is very specific, that's why I left it at the end, is that I think a direction this deck could go in is a rule of law direction. So this is a commitment, which is why I have it at the end, but you can set up, there's a lot of different cards that have this text. Each player can't cast more than 1 spell each turn. And the way you use it is you cast this, and with Raff Capashen, you don't get the downside because you cast your spells over multiple players' turns. And this really like slows down a lot of very powerful decks because now they just can't do a lot of the stuff that they want to do. Not every deck, and decks that are more kind of what I'm going to say mid-rangey, where they're just generally trying to play good stuff, will probably be fine as they'll cast their creatures and sorceries, you know, on their turn and then get to instants on your opponent's turns, so they won't feel it as much. But I will say it is still a huge, huge ability that I think people very much so underestimate. When you are playing this and your opponent casts a spell, you know they're not doing anything else that turn. So if the blue player you're worrying about counter magic is casting a spell, you know you can flash anything in and they can't interact. Also, it makes all of your counter magic pretty much uncounterable. If that's once again something you are worried about, that someone's going to place a bidding war on counter spells, is that because they've already cast the spell, you can just counter it and be happy. Now, traditionally, these cards do not have, let's see, they're generally not historic, is the only downside. So when we're using this, we're kind of locked into, yeah, the only one's green, I believe. Yeah, unfortunately, none of them are historic, but we are locked into playing them fairly. However, that does not take away just the sheer strength of these cards. Actually, there is one that's historic. It is Aethersworn Canonist. You could play this card. You could play this card really well, actually. You have a lot of artifact spells. So actually, I'm just going to suggest playing this one. And if you want to go further in the theme, I think there's a lot of strength you can put into the deck while making it rather unique and frustrating to play against. And that's everything I have to say. Those are my additions, and that's everything I have to say about Raff Capashen. This is a very fun deck. I really like this commander, and I think if you figure out the structural problems, especially with the mana curve and the land count, I think you'll find it to be much, much stronger. I already see it be, like, maybe once again, strong is the wrong word. It'll be much more successful. And I can see like the individual power in this deck is really high. But if we can make it, you know, just move a little smoother, you'll be much happier. Yeah, I hope this video was helpful to you. Thank you so much for sending the deck, and good luck and happy deck building. Thank you so much for watching. This video is brought to you by viewers like you and people on my Patreon. If you'd like to send me another draft of this deck, or any deck, there is a link in the video description down below. And if you'd like to make your deck one of my donation decks I work on, there's a link there too. Finally, if you'd like to like, comment, subscribe, I would be very appreciative. It helps the channel quite a bit. Thank you, and good luck in brewing and building.